Dean and Tyler Listle are registered investment advisor representatives. Investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, and Secure Retirement Solutions, LLC are not affiliated companies.
It's time for Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. Now, here are your hosts, Dean and Tyler.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Tyler and I will discuss topics that affect your retirement, such as investments, income planning, Social Security, and much more. How are you this morning, Tyler?
Good morning, Dean. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Great, thank you. Today we're going to talk about controlling what you can control in retirement. It seems to be we always get caught up in a number of topics or items that we really can't control in retirement. Items such as how long we're going to live, or the stock market itself and the volatility. But really, if you go out there and control the things that you can control, it's going to lead to a much more comfortable retirement or retirement plan. So to kick things off, Tyler, let's go through some of the items that, let's not worry about these too much because we can't control them. And then we'll talk about the items that we can control and how we can take advantage of those.
Yeah, Dean, and as you mentioned, in retirement, there's many different unknowns and things that you can control and also things that you can control. And for example, we can't control the stock market, even though some of us wish we could. Can't control the stock market. Interest rates, which right now are just coming up, just rising from all-time lows. Many retirees wish that interest rates were higher for savings and CDs and things like that. But obviously, we can't control interest rates. We can't control how long we live. We can do things to help us live a longer life, but you just never know. We also can't control different government regulations that may happen that affect the retirement planning climate that we live in now. However, there are things that you can control, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today to help some of you listeners out. And that's really comes down to our spending goals, things like fees, things like our investment risk that we take within our portfolio, different expenses, and our debt situation, as well as taxes within our retirement accounts. Those are some of the things that we can control that we'll be covering today. And the retirement climate is changing these days, where many people are now retiring sooner, and the average age of people retiring is 62 years old, which it makes sense because that's the first age that you're eligible to draw your Social Security benefits is 62. So people are retiring sooner. However, they're also living longer. Now, a married couple age 65 has at least a 50% chance of one of them making it to age 92. So if you're married, you're both 65 years old. At least one of you has a 50% chance to live all the way to age 92, which means for some people they need to plan for a retirement of 30 to 40 years. Because, Dean, we see it all the time, or maybe not all the time, but it's becoming more and more common where people are now retiring in their late 50s and even mid-50s, like 55 years old. So that means we're planning for a retirement of 30 to 40 years and then some. So that's something that we really need to keep in mind. And if people are retiring sooner and living longer, that could be a recipe for disaster if you don't have the right plan in place and if you're not planning with your retirement accounts and saving enough. Another thing, people right now, they have fewer pension plans, whereas in the past, a decade or two ago, many people work for employers, and the employer, they would have a pension where they got monthly income in addition to Social Security and savings. That was that three-legged stool that we talk about. Whereas now the employers are putting the savings onus on the employees, where they have to save in their 401k, their 403b, 457, their retirement plan. They have to now save, and that's leading to employees not taking it on their shoulders to save, and there's poor savings habits now that we develop. So with that said, there's many things that are unknown, but also things that we can control, and that's what we want to go over today.
Okay, and a couple things. First of all, think of it once. Average person works about 35 years, and now based on how much longer people are living, there's a possibility that you will be retired for 35 years. So during those 35 years of working, you're taking care of your everyday expenses and knocking down mortgage and things like that, taking care of the family. But you also have to set aside enough money to take care of those 35 years on average that you might have in retirement. So it's a little bit daunting. So let's talk about some of those items that we can control that'll help us. Number one is spending goals. We have a formula that we share with our clients. People come in to create a goal for our spending. Most people, when we talk to them about their retirement, we ask them what they plan on spending, and they really have no idea because they don't know how much the investments are going to pay out over their lifetime. So that's one of the reasons we want to go through a financial plan. We give complimentary retirement analyzers to anybody who comes into our office to inquire whether they want to work with us or not. And what that does is it outlines your spending goals. It looks at your investments and what you can anticipate taking from your fixed income and so on. So it gives you a retirement roadmap. But Ty, let's talk about spending goals and what's a formula we typically use and discuss with retirees.
Exactly, Dean. We do have a formula for that, but one of the things that we can control, like you mentioned, is spending goals. And you can control and plan for that in retirement by using a simple formula to make sure that you have enough in retirement funds to sustain your lifestyle and your desired spending goals, whatever they may be. So really what it comes down to is you start with your desired spending per year. So let's say that you're heading into retirement, you're planning for retirement, and you want to spend $70,000 a year in retirement. So you take that $70,000 per year, that's what you want, that's as your spending goal, and then you subtract your fixed income, which when we say fixed income, we talk about your Social Security and any pension that you may have. So it's money that's coming in every single month in the form of Social Security or a pension. And then let's say your fixed income through Social Security and a pension is $50,000 a year. So then you take your desired spending of $70,000 less your fixed income of $50,000, and you have your shortfall of $20,000 per year. Now that $20,000 that we have needs to be able to come from your investments. $20,000 per year is what you need to generate from your retirement accounts. And you then take that $20,000, that shortfall, and multiply it by 25. And in this scenario here, it equals $500,000, which that would be the amount of retirement funds that you should target to have saved up to sustain your desired spending goals in retirement without really causing too much concern to you. And this is really the same as withdrawing 4% per year from your investments because, Dean, as you know, in the financial world, there's something known as the safe withdrawal rate or safe distribution rate, which is 4% of your total retirement funds per year. So in this case here, we have $500,000. We take 4% of that. It's $20,000 per year. If someone had $100,000, they'd probably be better off taking $4,000 per year, which is 4%. But this is just a rule of thumb. So some people, they may be better off actually only withdrawing 3% because if they retire earlier in their 50s, for example, they have such a long time horizon that withdrawing less is probably going to be more beneficial to them. Whereas if someone works later on and retires when they're 70 years old, and they might not be in the best of health, they could get away with withdrawing 5, 6, 7% or even more per year from their investment. So it really depends on your personal situation, but that's kind of just a rule of thumb there. And when it comes to spending goals, it is something that if you use a simple formula, you can find out what you need to have saved up and what you can do. It's something that you can control heading into retirement.
Yeah, and also when you look at the 4%, also remember too, as Tyler said, that's a moving target. It really depends on your own personal financial plan and the investments that are put in place for you and your risk tolerance. There are some people that successfully draw more than that, of course. There are some people that 4% is going to decimate their retirement plan quickly if they are too safe, which happens to be one of the problems we see in retirement. People will get too conservative and lock down in cash, money market, and CD positions, which unfortunately 4% will probably eat that up in a hurry. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about that we can control is risk. We cannot control market risk. Market risk takes down the whole market, will take down investments. It's really hard to diversify out of market risk. However, there's investment risk. There are certain investments in your portfolio based on your risk tolerance or risk in what's going on in the economy and so on, you can control. So, Tyler, let's talk about diversification and balanced and so on, and then we'll talk about some risk-managed investments here.
Yeah, Dean, like you said, with market risk. It's something that we can't diversify out of, but we can control how much investment risk we have in our portfolio, which is done through diversification. And diversification, that's where basically you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. You want to have different types of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange-traded funds. And then you want to take it a step further. And with your stocks, for example, you probably want to have an allocation to large cap stocks, mid cap, small cap, international, and emerging markets. With different bonds or bond funds, you might want to have short term, intermediate term, government, corporate bonds. So just being diversified so that way you don't have all your eggs in one basket is something that we recommend through diversification. And keep in mind, diversification, it doesn't guarantee a profit or protect against a loss, but it is used to spread out your investment risk. And if you're heading into retirement now, you probably don't want a portfolio of all 100% stocks, because that means that your entire portfolio, all 100%, is then at risk if there's a market downturn. So if the market heads down 10, 20, 30% or more, you're probably going to go down somewhere right along with it, because all your investment is within the market, the stock market. So instead, you're probably better suited for a balanced, actively risk-managed investment portfolio that utilizes stocks, bonds, maybe some alternative investments, and cash positions all in one. So, Dean, why don't you explain to the listeners how an actively risk-managed portfolio can be used to control your investment risk?
Okay, before we talk about risk-managed investment portfolios, we're going to take a quick break here.
You're listening to Dean and Tyler Listle, investment advisors with Secure Retirement Solutions located on Allied Street in Green Bay. For a complimentary review of your current investments, or if you have questions, please call them at 920-347-9888 or go to their website at srsplans.com.
Okay, risk-managed investment portfolios. Unfortunately, due to the market downturn in 2008, risk-managed investment portfolios became much more popular as a result. But first, understand that even though an investment portfolio in the stock market, even though it's termed as risk-managed, you can still lose money in a risk-managed portfolio. A risk-managed investment portfolio, though, is to keep you from a catastrophic downturn. Okay, we don't want to go through a 2008 situation when you're coming close to retirement or are in retirement, because unfortunately 2008 forced a lot of people back into the workforce because they had to. They weren't prepared. So a risk-managed investment portfolio, we talked about it in previous shows, really what it does do is you accumulate some cash while the market is doing well. You're taking your gains. You're giving a haircut to those particular equity positions that are doing quite well, and you do build up some cash within the portfolio. And the reason you want to take those gains when the market is doing well and build up some cash is you want to do what everybody talks about, and that is, sell high. And this is basically what you're doing. You're selling some positions high, you're building cash. Then if the market does go down, it gets down into whether it's correction territory or it's just jumping around a little bit. If the market goes down and then stabilizes, 45, 60, 90 days, whatever it may be, where you can see a trend, then you can use that cash that was accumulated at a high to buy low. So again, you are doing what everybody talks about for generations, which is, sell high and buy low. However, a lot of people took it upon themselves to try to time the market, or they let emotions come into play. And first of all, timing the market is not a good thing to do. We have a saying in the office, time in the market is a wonderful thing. Timing the market is not. And we're not timing the market here. We're taking gains when the market is giving us those, and we're building cash for that day that there's some volatility. But when people try to time their own portfolio and create their own risk-managed portfolio by building cash, unfortunately, emotions come into play. And in 2008, 2009, we saw a lot of this where the market had gone down significantly, and people finally got to a point where, I'm just going to cash out. And unfortunately, they typically cashed out at the bottom. So you sold equity positions that are now at the bottom to create cash to be able to buy your way out of a portfolio slump at the bottom. It doesn't make sense. So what we do is we take the emotion out of it. We subscribe to an awful lot of industry analysis, algorithms. We look at the economy. We do this for a living, okay? And what we do is, again, take the emotion out of it. We build cash when cash should be built up to be able to buy low if that time comes. Also understand it's actively managed. It is not a buy and hold strategy. A buy and hold strategy is you will be put into an investment and you will just let it ride. You will be in sectors that might be out of favor, aren't doing very well. As an example, you might be in the telecommunications with some of your funds, and your advisor will say, well, we need to be in there in case the market does pick up there. Our theory is you need to go where the momentum is. If the momentum is not in that particular sector, why are we? I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting back into that sector should it start to pick up. So we believe in trying to pick up as much gain as we possibly can within your risk tolerance, but we also believe in saving some of that money in the form of cash. So if the market goes down, we can risk manage your portfolio.
Yeah, Dean, you mentioned a couple of good points there. And I just wanted to expand upon that too, whereas we find people who want all the upside of the market with no downside. And we say it all the time, you just can't have the best of both worlds. And this is where an actively risk-managed investment portfolio comes into play, because when the market is going in a positive direction, when it's giving gains, we're going to be further into the market. Then when there's a market pullback, same thing. We're going to pull out and go into a cash position to try and preserve somewhat what we have there. The other thing that you said, you made a really good point with market timing. And I see it all the time where there's some younger people that come in and talk to me and they talk about, wanting to go in different types of speculative stocks and try and buy low and sell high. And this is all within their retirement accounts. And I cringe at that because especially for younger people, like you mentioned, a really good saying is time in the market, not timing the market. And when you're so young, you really have that time on your side where you can really utilize compounding interest, and it's all about just investing. You're going to have a better chance at just putting money away in good quality investments as opposed to trying to time the market in any sort of speculative investments. The other things when we talk about controlling your risk and diversifying, you can also diversify by looking outside of the market, outside of the stock and bond market, and utilizing things like fixed annuities, index annuities, or CDs with a portion of your retirement funds to shield them from that market risk. So again, like CDs and fixed annuities where you're locked up for a certain time period, but then you also make a fixed interest rate and you can't lose money. So it's another alternative to stocks, bonds, mutual funds to the market.
Okay, it also just adds that safety bucket. We tell people when we put together a retirement plan for somebody and we look at their investments or retirement income plans, we like to have safety as a foundation first. That also includes your fixed income, such as Social Security and pensions, if you do have one. And then we look at the income bucket and then the growth bucket. So really, we're addressing the primary principle of a retirement plan, which is safety, but also adding to diversification there, Tyler. How about real estate? I mean, real estate, I'm not a real estate expert. I will tell you this, though. Real estate in the right situations and working with the right people can be a very good investment. I'm sure it can be a poor investment, too, if you don't do it correctly, just like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds can be. But we also believe in insurance products. Insurance products diversify you out of the market, as well as precious metal products, gold and silver. So really, don't get into a rut where you think the only way to accumulate wealth is through stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. It really isn't. And diversification outside of the market does help that market risk.
Exactly, Dean. Good points there. And one last thing I wanted to mention in terms of controlling your risk is also rebalancing your investment portfolio over time. And you rebalance so your investments don't get out of whack. So, for example, let's say you're heading into retirement and you have a 50-50 balanced portfolio, meaning 50% in stocks for growth potential and 50% in bonds for preservation, income, and stability. So balance 50-50. And then if you don't rebalance over time, when the market's doing well over the course of 2 years, maybe your stocks are at 70% and your bond allocation is at 30%, because stocks can grow so much more than bonds. They're used for growth. And at that point, you're at 70-30. If we were to have a market downturn and you didn't rebalance back to your 50-50 allocation, then at that point there, if 2008 happens again, you could be losing a lot more than you had expected because you have so much more to riskier investments like stocks and less to bonds, which are used for protection and stability. So Again, we want to rebalance, and these are just a number of things that we can do here, diversify and rebalance, and maybe utilize an actively risk-managed portfolio to control your investment risk.
Okay, the next item here, something that you can control, but it seems to be a lot of people really, they're aware of it, but don't take the initiative to ask, and that is you can control your investment fees. At least be aware of them. And before Tyler starts talking about fees within the investment itself, I want to talk about a couple things such as the difference, with brokers, investment advisors, and registered representatives and so on. First of all, always understand when you're dealing with a financial professional, it's your money, okay? Understand that. It's your money, and you are hiring that person to help grow it and or protect it. But the bottom line is you need to know about it because it's your money and it's going to take you into your retirement. So having said that, always ask your financial professional how they get paid. It's extremely important, okay? It might be enlightening when you do find out. And if somebody can't tell you how they get paid or how expensive or cheap an investment is, you should really start looking around, okay? But understand whether you're dealing with a broker or registered representative, which is typically a commissionable position. An investment advisor or a certified financial planner is typically fee-based. But ask those questions because, unfortunately, in this industry, a lot of people will use generically investment advisor when they might not be. So check that out and always ask how they get paid. And when they tell you how they personally get paid, then start asking about how expensive or cheap the individual investments are. So we'll talk about that. Tyler, let's go through the mutual funds and exchange-traded funds and stocks.
Yeah, good points there, Dean. And then within your investments, there are also many different types of fees, and all sorts of investments carry some sort of fee. And many are really hard to figure out exactly what the fees are that you're paying. So if you look on your quarterly or your monthly statement from your retirement account, you'll see some different types of investments in there. And the next step is to figure out, okay, what are the fees that I'm paying for these investments? And a majority of people hold either mutual funds or exchange-traded funds. And each of those have different internal fees ranging anywhere from 0.05% per year to 3% per year or more, depending on the type of mutual fund and the share class of the fund. And mutual funds are different than exchange-traded funds because exchange-traded funds, they're typically cheaper because they track an index. They're more passive, where what they do is they might track the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ or the Russell 2000. They're just going to track an index and have the exact same stocks or bonds that index has. So they're typically cheaper and more efficient, whereas mutual funds, they might charge anywhere from 0.5 to over 3% per year internally, because with mutual funds, there are fund managers, professional managers that internally they'll buy or sell different stocks or bonds within your fund. And when they're actively managing inside of it, they're going to charge more because they're doing research, they're buying, they're selling. They're not just tracking an index. They're doing more than that. And really, when it comes down to it, all other things equal, you want to find the fund with the lower internal fees. And those fees can be found in the fund prospectus is what it's called, which a prospectus, it's a legal document required by the Securities and Exchange Commission that provides all kinds of details about an investment, including the fees. And that can be found, we recommend for our listeners, on a website as well as our clients called Morningstar. And Morningstar, anyone can find it. You can just Google that. It's an investment website, and you can just punch in the name or the ticker symbol. It doesn't cost anything to do it, and you can get all sorts of information on the internal fees, what you pay per year. And then what I mean by all things equal, you want the fund with the lower internal fees. For example, if you're looking at two different mutual funds, they're both international stock funds, and one is 1% per year and the other is 1.3% per year. The one that's 1% per year, it's probably going to be more efficient over time because you're saving money over time with that. The other thing in terms of cheaper or more efficient investments is actually single stocks. And a single stock, where most online brokerage firms, they charge a one-time commission to either buy or sell the stock. So, for example, TD Ameritrade charges $6.95 whenever you buy a stock or you sell a stock, and that's it. There's no internal ongoing fees to manage a stock like there are for mutual funds or ETFs. And reason being is because with a single stock, you're the one managing it. There's not any type of brokerage firm that manages it.
Okay, one other item, Tyler, I want to jump in here, and that is we talk about efficiency of investments. Understand in the financial world, when somebody talks about efficient portfolio or investments, they're talking cheap, typically. Okay, so I use the nice term efficient, it's cheap. But what happens if you have an efficient portfolio, you reduce those fees, it really takes the stress off of that portfolio from a risk standpoint, because if you reduce some of those fees within the portfolio and within the individual investments, you do not have to go out there and push so hard to get a higher rate of return, which typically carries more risk. You can use a more conservative portfolio that many times will outproduce a more aggressive portfolio that is filled with expenses. So I would rather put together a more conservative portfolio that's efficient and outperform a more aggressive portfolio that carries more risk. It's better for the client.
Exactly. And Dean, one more thing that I wanted to mention here before moving on with the fees is just turnover ratio is another number to pay attention to. And it indicates how frequently mutual fund managers are making moves within your mutual fund, how frequently they're buying and selling stocks or bonds internally, and they can result in different transaction fees and internal fees and tax implications as well. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. But just investment fees, they're something that you can control. It's going to take a little research or talking to your advisor, doing research on your own to find out what you're paying. But when you can find that, then you can go ahead and control the fees from there on.
And remember, if you feel comfortable enough to work with an advisor that is managing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of yours, you should be comfortable enough to ask them how they make their money. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Control your taxes. This is a big one. This is where we see a lot of mistakes when people retire. They'll come in, they might have been retired a year or two, or they're planning to retire, and we'll ask them, what is your plan for withdrawal? Where are you going to pull your money from? And they'll say, well, I don't know, Social Security, this pension, and maybe this account or that account. Okay, this account or that account, how does it affect your taxes? Typically, it does. Should you be withdrawing from your taxable account first early on in your retirement, or should it be from a Roth account, which is totally tax-free, or a non-qualified account that might just have partial taxes? It really comes down to modeling this all out. Understand that your Social Security benefit could be up to 50% taxable at your current tax rate, or up to 85% of your Social Security benefit would be taxable at your current tax rate. That depends on the amount of income you bring in. So again, you need to make sure that when you start withdrawing, you have a withdrawal plan and you take taxes into account. Now, we are not CPAs. We're not tax advisors. We have one in the office, but I can tell you right now, when you put together a retirement plan, you want to have input from somebody who is experience in taxes. So Tyler, let's talk about controlling your taxes.
Yeah, really quickly here, Dean, last one, but when it comes to controlling your taxes, there's really three pools of money that you have your retirement funds in. Tax-free, which is the Roth IRA, a very good idea for most people. The other one is taxable investments, so anything held outside of a retirement account, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, you typically pay taxes on the gains when you sell off those investments. And the last one that we have is tax-deferred accounts, which is what we see most of our client money in. Those are your traditional IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs, your 457 plans. So really it comes down to just having different accounts, being tax diversified, and having options to pull your money from in retirement, so that way you can kind of spread out your tax burden throughout your whole entire retirement. And go about it that way. So really the last one that we have here is controlling your taxes in terms of what you can control in retirement.
Which is a big one. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for this week. See you later, and hope you'll join us again next week.
See you next week. Thank you, Dean.
You've been listening to Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. To get more information from Dean and Tyler, contact them at Secure Retirement Solutions on Allied Street in Green Bay. Call 920-347-9888 or visit them at srsplans.com. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC. Member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services is not an affiliated company.